is Nicholas Whitaker, Media Outreach Manager on the Google News Lab, here with Stacie Chan. We're here to talk about Google News and AMP and all things good like that today. We're going to be going for about an hour today. We'll have room for Q&A towards the end of the presentation today. And as always, if you're interested, you can find out more information about the News Lab on g.co/newslab. And this particular office hours session, the December office hours, will be live on YouTube directly after this session, as well as on our Google Plus page. And you can send us questions via YouTube, Google Plus, or Twitter if you have any. Stacie, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what we're doing today?
Absolutely. Thanks, Nick. It's good to be back. I think I was here the very inaugural Hangout on Air. So today, like you said, I'll be talking a little bit about Google News, and in other Google News, a lot about AMP, or Accelerated Mobile Pages. I know everyone probably has a lot of questions about both. To make sure that we're able to cover everything, I'll primarily be going over Google News today, and Nick and I promised to have an entire series of AMP Hangouts earlier in the year to answer all of your burning questions, because it's a fantastic initiative. We want to make sure it gets the time that it needs to fully explain everything.
And in fact, we're going to be doing all January, once a week, we're going to be doing open office hours specifically on AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages. So if you have questions, as I'm sure a lot of people will, the best thing to do is always send your questions to us via Twitter, via our Google Plus page, or via our YouTube page, or you can email us at newslabsupport@google.com. We'll make sure Stacie has those questions, and we'll make sure to cover those during the session.
Great. Thanks, Nick. All right, so I'll go ahead and kick off the presentation. Well, there's Nick. Hello, Nick. All right, here's the presentation. Okay, so to get a hold of me, you can just tweet any Google News questions at me at Stacie Chan. And if you're following along and playing the social media game, you can hashtag inside Google News. And then I'll try to answer any questions we get there as well. We also have our contact channels, which I'll list at the end of the presentation if you want to email us any questions later on. Okay, so a brief overview of what today's office hours are going to cover. First, we'll go over what Google News is as a product, and then the topics will get progressively more technical. So we'll start by going under the hood, how exactly Google News works. Then I'll cover how you can share more of your content with Google News to ensure a lot of that great traffic coming from users. Finally, how to optimize your content so that it appears across Google News, across more Google products. I'll answer a few of your questions, and then we'll dive into a pretty high-level overview of AMP. As we mentioned, we really want to give AMP its time, and we'll go over very specific parts of AMP in early January. Okay, so Google News from its origins to today. So as a member on the Google News team, I'm really proud of our product. We're actually one of Google's oldest products. It started in 2001 when one of our esteemed engineers, Krishna Bharat, was tinkering around, and he wanted to consume news in a different way and get a much wider breadth of news sources. And it was largely after the 9/11 attacks in 2001 where he wanted to view a specific event, 9/11, across different sources. Whereas traditionally we were always reading one or two or possibly three news sources and only reading what the newspaper was telling us to read. So he created Google News in order to surface different perspectives and voices from across the world. And so that's an early screenshot that you're seeing on the screen. Fast forward to today, 15 years later, we have still news.google.com, but a much different looking screenshot of our current desktop. You can see there's a lot more content. We have different modules to try to present as much of your great high quality content on the Google News homepage. We also have your content across different devices, whether it's on a tablet. We have mobile apps for iOS and Android. And yes, we even have an Apple Watch app. One of our engineers was able to get this out before any other product at Google. So yes, Google News was the first Google Apple Watch app. And it's really it shows our commitment to presenting your content across all different forms, because we realize that users are consuming content in many ways that they hadn't conventionally done before. All right, and quickly, by the numbers, the product has grown tremendously over the past decade and a half. From that first screenshot, you saw maybe a handful of different news publishers from around the world. Today, we have over 70,000 news sources in the Google News database. And because those news sources are in different languages across the world, we organize the content by an edition. So an edition is a combination of a country and a language. For example, Canada has 2 editions, Canada English and Canada French. And collectively, Google drives over 10 billion clicks a month to the over 70,000 news sources we have in our database. And to the Google News homepage alone, we get about 1 billion unique visitors a week. Yes, that is 1 billion with a B. So we're talking about loads of traffic back to publishers. And on the Google News team, that is our measurement of success. We want that 10 billion number to double, triple over many, many years, if possible. That is how we determine that what we're doing over here at Google is successful, if we're driving more clicks back to you all, the publishers. And that is part of our mission. We are a go-away site, as I'm skipping to the second bullet. We also want to identify all of your fresh content on current events in near real time. We don't think there's any other product out there that can really identify what the news is across 70,000 publishers as quickly as we can. And we do that because we ultimately want to send the traffic back to your site. We don't want news.google.com to be a destination site. It is actually designed to send users away from us back to nytimes.com, huffingtonpost.com, whatever your site is. And that leads to our third bullet in our mission, is to aid the discovery of your content. You've got your loyal readers typing in your URL in their browser. We want you to get some of those new readers who may not be a hooked reader of your site just yet, but they'll find your content on the Google News desktop site, on our mobile device, or even on the Apple News Watch. And we also offer diverse perspectives. We use something called clustering technology. So back to our origins, we would cluster all of the articles around 9/11. So a reader can view the event and get a totally different set of perspectives about one particular current event. For example, in the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris, there were over 10,000 articles written about that specific event. So our technology was able to cluster all those articles and give readers pretty much an unlimited perspective of that event, because so many of you were writing about that particular topic. And finally, we want to help you publishers build an even larger audience. Stats show that media appetite has increased and only continues to increase as we spend more time across all of our devices consuming content. This is a huge opportunity, we believe, for you all to expand users' consumption of your content specifically. Okay, so now we'll deep dive a little more technical into how Google News actually works. The first thing that we have to dispel is the myth that we have human editors. My background is actually in journalism, but I promise you, I have not written a single article in my time at Google that has appeared in Google News, or across any Google product for that matter. The scale at which Google has to identify news articles in real time just would not work if we relied on humans. I'll admit I'm a little slow. So we have to rely on an algorithm that is automated. Therefore, we don't individually tweak a publisher's rankings. It's all relied on algorithmically. And those articles are ranked based on hundreds of signals and attributes that we're getting from the 70,000 publishers in our database. So step by step, how that discovery process actually works is we have 70,000 publishers in our database, but that is constantly growing. As news sites are popping up around the world, which we are in full support of and we highly encourage, our database is growing. So there is a review process. You can apply to be in Google News, or your loyal readers can suggest your site for inclusion in Google News, and there is a review process. And your site can either be accepted or rejected. So if your site is accepted into Google News, we will crawl your site very frequently, every single day, to see if there are new news articles to be discovered. And then after those articles are discovered, we classify them, if it's a business article or a science article, and then we'll cluster it according to topics and keywords. And then within a cluster, like the Charlie Hebdo cluster that I mentioned, then comes a difficult task for Google News to rank those articles. And ranking can vary across user by user, because a huge layer that we're really focusing on at Google News now is the personalization aspect. Articles that you see on your Google News homepage could be very different from the person sitting next to you in your cubicle or on the train. It's really displayed now by users' interests. So if you're based in Mountain View, where I am, or I live in San Francisco, it'll actually fine-tune the articles that are listed based on my locale. We have a new section on the homepage called Suggested for You, where it will start suggesting articles based on your specific interests. So I think right now I have like Star Wars, Steph Curry of the Warriors, since I live in the Bay Area, and Hillary Rodham Clinton, in full disclosure. Those are my topics that Google thinks that I care about, which they did get right. And to dive more into that ranking step, because that's often the question that we get the most, is what are those signals that factor into Google News ranking? So on the left-hand side, you can see the four main buckets that these signals fall under. So the first is freshness. It is Google News. We value fresh content. The second is novelty over duplication. So if your story is the original, the breaking, the exclusive story, the algorithm will try to rank that higher. The third I mentioned is local or personal relevance. It depends on what your interests are, where you're based. The algorithm will try to surface those articles higher. And then finally, trusted sources. This is something that you build over time as a news source. The authority in Google News is really determined on, are there a lot of other sources linking to your articles? Are you getting a lot of clicks to that particular story? There's many, many signals that factor into this very complex algorithm. And because we have such limited real estate on the homepage, a lot of times those rankings can change within minutes to really give publishers as much face time on the homepage as possible.
Now, Stacie, I got a quick question for you. A lot of times when I'm talking with publishers and newsrooms, I get the question of like, so, we've applied to Google News, we're waiting for verification, we're waiting to be approved, or I usually get the question, how do I make sure that my news gets ranked more highly on Google News? Like, how do you approach that?
It's a fair question, and as a publisher, or a former publisher myself, that was the exact question that I used to ask. Quite frankly, it is about doing good journalism, because naturally the ecosystem is going to boost good journalism because other sources are going to start linking to your site. There are a lot of new digital sources that have made big plays that have come onto the scene. Vox.com, Vice.com, BuzzFeed. Those sources didn't exist when Google News first came onto the scene, but you'll start to see them now on the homepage. So it's not impossible for a new digital player to come in and start gaining traction within Google News simply by doing good journalism and then ultimately ranking higher. So there is no magic bullet solution that I can offer, but I can just encourage publishers to continue to do good journalism. Make sure that you're playing fair. If you link out to other publisher sources, they'll start doing the same, and that's where you get a lot of that good ranking signals that'll help you in Google News.
So it's not so much about gaming the system or kind of like configuring in a certain way. It's really about creating really high quality journalism that people want to share and people want to link to. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's exactly correct. A lot of publishers think things like keyword stuffing will be helpful. And I tell publishers, you're already naturally including keywords in your story by just writing the story. You don't need to unnecessarily stuff your headline with keywords or things like that. I remember I heard a myth when I was a journalist that you can't have your headline be more than 6 words. I thought, okay, I'm gonna write short, punchy headlines. But that doesn't matter because the algorithm doesn't care about the number of words in your headline. It cares about signals that a robot can understand. Again, like links back to your story. If there's certain traffic coming to your story, that's what the Google News bot can understand, not the number of words in your headline. That makes no difference to the bot. And it's a good question, Nick, because I'll go over in the next 2 sections what publishers can do to optimize their content so it appears across more services. That advice I can offer. So great transition. The first thing that publishers should do is visit the Google News Publisher Center. It's a new tool that we launched in August of 2014 to give publishers more transparency. We got the very fair criticism that publishers didn't know what was going on with Google News, how their content was appearing, even what content was appearing in Google News. So we built this tool so publishers could understand exactly how Google News is viewing their site. So if you check out the site, news.google.com/publisher, you do need to be the webmaster of your site. And the way to do that is to go into Search Console, which is google.com/webmasters, and you need to prove that you're the owner of the site. And we do this for good verification reasons. We want to make sure that the right people are accessing your account in the Publisher Center. So I am the webmaster of staciechan.com, for example, but I'm not a site in Google News, which is fine because it's not really a news site. But if you believe that your site met all of the Google News guidelines and criteria, you could click that button, Request Inclusion in Google News. If you believe that a site is missing, you can verify that site in Webmaster Tools, that second button that you see on the page. And to take a step back, the Google News Publisher Center, as I mentioned, is a way to be more transparent about how Google News views your content, but it's also what we view as the one-stop shop for you to manage your presence in Google News. There are a few different things you can do. The first thing, as I mentioned, is to request inclusion for your site. We know that a lot of you publishers actually have networks of sites. We want to make sure that we're not missing a single one. So make sure that all of your sites are included in Google News and you apply directly through the Publisher Center. The second thing that you need to do is within all of your sites, make sure that we have all of your sections. So we know many of you will start covering the 2016 elections next year. And previously, if you didn't tell us that you had a new section, xyz.com/2016 elections, it was possible that we would just miss all of that content in Google News because we didn't know that that was a new section. Now with the Publisher Center, you can go in and just add that section yourself. Add every single section on your site, xyz.com/business, xyz.com/health. Make sure all of those sections are in the Publisher Center so we don't miss crawling an article. The third thing that you should do is check your sources information. We've seen publishers for branding reasons want to change their name, added .com, for example, to represent the migration to an online site. Whatever it is, make sure the source information is correct. We want to accurately represent your site in Google News. The fourth thing you should do is apply labels to your source and sections. For example, if your site is entirely a blog, you should add the blog label. If it's entirely an opinion site, you should add the op-ed label. And similarly for your sections, so you help us better cluster your content in the appropriate topic. Sometimes the Google News algorithm gets it wrong. We'll accidentally put a business article in the entertainment section. Keep in mind, this is an algorithm doing all this with hundreds of articles from 70,000 publishers trying to do this in near real time. Sometimes there's a miss based on the keywords. We think a certain story is a politics article when it really should be more of a technology article, for example. And then finally, I'll dive a little bit more into this. This is where we get into the optimization part of Google News. You should, through the Publisher Center, add your editor's picks feed, your mobile app links, and your YouTube channel. So what is editor's picks? Editor's picks is that section on the Google News homepage. That's that top image there. It's my favorite spot on the homepage because everywhere else on the page, content is ranked and surfaced algorithmically. This is the one section on the Google News homepage where you, the editors, get to pick which content appears here. So for example, the Christian Science Monitor selected those 5 articles to appear in this section. And the way you appear in this section is to create a very simple RSS feed to showcase up to 5 of your articles. We don't provide editorial advice, so you can list whatever you would like here. We hear from publishers, they like to highlight their evergreen content. Sometimes they like to put their breaking news content. Entirely up to you. And you submit this feed through the Publisher Center. That's that second image there. In the Publisher Center, in the Sections module, you'll see the Add Editor's Picks button. It'll ask you to enter the URL, that third image there, and you press Submit. It'll tell you if the feed validates or not, and then that's it. You do need to maintain your feed. We ask that articles are within the past 48 hours. We are news products, so we definitely like to have very recent content in that section. And who gets to appear in that section is done algorithmically. The carousel actually has 10 publishers it'll show at a given time, but the 10 that appear really depends on who the user is. Because Google News users can personalize their Google News homepage, it'll show the sources that users have marked as preferred sources. So I do love the Christian Science Monitor, in full disclosure. That's why it probably appeared in my carousel on the homepage. So that's Editor's Picks. The second way you should utilize the Publisher Center and direct users back to your content is to promote your mobile app or apps. For those who have both iOS and Android apps, you should add both. That's within the Publisher Center as well. Click that big Add Mobile Apps button, and you add the URL to your Google Play Store app or the Apple App Store app. And then we will try to surface these apps in various locations across Google News. The first way we're doing that actually is within Editor's Picks. So you first need to make sure you submit your Editor's Picks feed. Then if you're on an Android device, we'll surface the Google Play badge under Editor's Picks. On desktop, we'll surface both if you have both. If you have one, that's fine. And the ultimate goal here is we realize you're investing a lot of time into maintaining these apps. We want to be able to promote these and make sure users are consuming your content wherever we can help direct them to, whether it's back on your mobile site or it's within your mobile app. And then finally, we encourage all publishers who have a YouTube channel to make sure to submit it to us. You will do that through our Google News Help Center. You'll contact us. And as you can see, you can either email us or chat us. That's actually a new feature that we launched to make sure that you can get a hold of us as soon as possible, especially things like adding a YouTube channel. We encourage you to do that quickly. So you can get in contact with us, submit your YouTube channel, and it is then your videos are eligible to show up in the media strip, as we call that space on the homepage where you see all those videos. And then lastly, this is not done through the Publisher Center yet, but we, at Google News, we're always looking for other signals to identify standout journalism. It's a very, very difficult thing to do for an algorithm. So publishers' signals that we can use, we're always looking for ways to identify these. So one idea that we had that we launched in 2013, I believe, was the standout tag. So this you publishers can apply on an article by article basis. And loosely it's defined as use when you have a breaking story or an exclusive, or a solid piece of journalism that you spent months working on. And you would implement this standout tag in the header of the article. And it's one simple line, link rel, quote, standout. And you would link to your specific article. Or because Google News works on the ecosystem of 70,000 publishers we have in our database, you can also use the standout tag to recognize original work from other sites. Instead of including your own site's URL, you would include the link to www.othersite.com. And when you self-cite, as we call it, you can use it a maximum of 7 times a week. But if you're linking to other sites' standout journalism, you can use this as many times as you want. We are relying on as many signals as possible to signal a healthy link ecosystem. So we highly encourage this, using the standout tag to link to others' sites as many times as you would like during the week. Okay, and optimizing your content. This is where it does get a little more technical. So for any webmasters out there, this is when you would probably want to perk up. And also you can pull up your webmaster account if you can. This will help when we try to troubleshoot. There's issues going on, and it'll help as I walk you through some screenshots. Okay, so the first question we get a lot from publishers is, well, how do I know if my articles are in Google News? The easiest way is to do a site search. I used to do this all the time. I would type in site:/mysite.com and see what would show up. So this will help, if you're the Telegraph, debug which sites are missing from the Google News index. And we know a lot of publishers use a sitemap for us to discover your articles. So to quickly help identify how we crawl articles, we have 2 ways, basically, of discovering your content. Through your news sections that are listed in the Publisher Center that I went over, but also news sitemaps. As you can see, we have a snapshot of a news sitemap from an example publisher. And you can have both. You can have one or the other. My advice to publishers is the more discovery methods you have, the increased likelihood that we will miss few of your articles. So they're not both required. So publishers think that they have to have a new sitemap. That is not true. It does help in discovery. So if you do have a new sitemap, here are some best practices. Your name, language, and URL in your sitemap have to match exactly what we have listed in the Publisher Center. If any one of those is slightly incorrect, for example, if you didn't capitalize the J in journal, and there is a mismatch between your sitemap and the Publisher Center, you'll generate a bunch of errors in Search Console. And in trying to be helpful, we realize we've actually alarmed many publishers. So I hope this part of office hours clarifies a few things. So one little mismatch, as I mentioned, will kick off a bunch of errors that you see here in that left-hand side image. What happens, though, is if you don't resubmit your sitemap after fixing the errors, that error will actually stick in your Search Console account until you press the resubmit button. So you can see errors from as old as April. So the steps that you need to do to clear this is, 1, fix your error. Then you need to press the resubmit button. And then this should actually wipe the error clean. And as I mentioned before, do not worry if there's errors on your sitemap. It doesn't mean that we're not crawling your content, because there's still that other way through your news sections that we can discover your articles. So there's a little...
Excuse me, and Stacie, with these errors that pop up, I mean, are there indicators for folks that are just kind of first wading into this that indicate if it's like a formatting error or if it's something more specific? You know, how would they specifically figure out how to unravel some of this?
So I would go in and check, just go into the Search Console. If you see an error, open up your sitemap and then open up your Publisher Center account and make sure everything matches exactly. So your name, your language, your URL, And that's not just the top level domain, it's all the URLs of the articles you have listed in your sitemap. A common error we see is that the articles in your sitemap, for example, have www, whereas the URL listed in your publisher center is just HTTP, for example. That granularity is enough to trigger this error. And if you're a little unsure, feel free to reach out to us. We can investigate and make sure that everything's squared away. But the best way is just to go into your Search Console account and see if there's an error.
The spelling counts.
Spelling counts. I know. Unfortunately, there's no spell check or anything like that to detect those. So yes, we have to make sure that everything is spelled 100% correctly. Okay. Moving on. So troubleshooting if specific articles are missing. So we're staying in Search Console again. That website is google.com/webmasters. There's another section you can see in the left-hand bar, crawl errors. And if you click on the News tab, because this is specifically for articles missing from Google News, you'll see a high count. And at the bottom of the page, to the right-hand side, you'll see all the errors and the specific error followed by the timestamp. And if you click on any one of those, we'll actually go a little bit more in detail on what exactly the article means and our recommendations to fix this. And I want to expand on that. It's not necessarily the word count that is generating that article too short or article too long error, for example. It's really about the ratio of text to non-text. So remember, a bot is looking at this article and trying to determine if it's a news article. So the bot wants to make sure that there's enough text to actually be a piece of content. What it wants to avoid is crawling and indexing a comments page or a forum page, for example, or a contact us page. So it needs to identify enough text versus other stuff like ads or comments or sidebar content for it to think that it's a news article. So that's roughly what those errors mean. We're constantly coming up with ways to try to further explain those. So we're open to suggestions too. We realize it's not the perfect explanation, but we're trying to get as technical but also as layman as possible in explaining what happened to cause your article to not be indexed.
And this raises an interesting question about the types of news sites too. So let's say, for example, I'm a photojournalist. I have a site that is maybe a travel blog or a travel news site, very heavy on the photos, maybe less on the text. Would that trigger these types of warnings of articles too short?
That's a good question. So for the article too short error, it's often generated if you have fewer than 80 words. So Nick, for your site, for example, just make sure with every photo page or slideshow, you have text of 80 words to describe what's going on that page. Because remember, to cluster or to classify and cluster an article, the bot needs to be able to read what the page is about. So it needs enough keywords to detect what's going on in that photo or slideshow or video. Does that make sense?
Very much.
Okay. So we try to do a very thorough job of explaining what all these specific crawl errors are. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. This is actually a screenshot of our Help Center page. Nick, are those links clickable from the presentation?
They should be.
Okay, so hopefully everyone watching, you can click on that link that I have listed on the top of the page. And this will go over errors like article too short, date not found, date too old, et cetera, et cetera. And we do our best to try to provide an explanation, but keep in mind there's tens of thousands of articles being indexed every few seconds. We try to provide as granular explanations as possible. We don't always do as customized a job as we could. So if you have any questions about a specific article, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll do our best to troubleshoot.
And actually, Stacie, I misunderstood what you said. So within the Hangout, people aren't going to be able to click on the link, but what we can do is we can add them in the comment section below.
Gotcha.
So people are interested in any of the links referenced in this particular office hours, we'll provide those afterwards.
Sounds good. Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Bummer. Good to know, though, for future presentations. I thought people were going to be able to interact with it. Okay, well, we'll maybe put in a feature request for the Hangout on Air or Google presentation docs team.
There you go.
Okay, and then lastly, I know we went over how to troubleshoot within Search Console, but my team has been working really hard to launch a troubleshooting tool that'll be directly in the Publisher Center. Because as I mentioned, our goal with the Publisher Center is to be the one-stop shop for you to do everything with Google News. So I can't commit to a specific date. All I can say is it's coming very, very soon. I was hoping to announce it during this Hangout on Air. We didn't quite get it in time, but I'm very excited, and we'll definitely go over that in a future Hangout, if Nick will be so generous to have us again.
I will indeed. And just for those of you who are just joining us, as a reminder, throughout January, every week in January, we're going to be doing an open office hours with Stacie Chan talking about exactly this.
Fantastic. Okay, so in summary, the 5 ways to optimize your site and your content in Google News is to, 1, share any update about your site via the Publisher Center. If you have a new news section for any topic that you're covering, whether it's the Olympics, the 2016 US presidential elections, whatever it is, update everything within the Publisher Center. Secondly, if you've got articles that you believe are missing from Google News, check out your Google News account in Search Console. It's a wealth of technical information. Poke around there, make sure your site is in order, and that'll increase the number of articles that are indexed in Google News. Third, create an RSS feed for editors' picks, because that is the one section that you have control over what content appears on the Google News homepage. It's super easy. We have a templated editors' picks feed for you in our Help Center, and you can just copy and paste that and put in your own site's articles. Number 4, I wish I had this like David Letterman style, you know, like the top 10, but I could make my own Google News top 5 next time. I'll do that. I'll come up with 10 for next time. But number 4, use the standout tag on up to 7 of your articles a week. This is to signal to Google News that, hey, we really invested a lot of time in this article, and we think it's a really, I was going to say kick-ass. I don't know if I can say that on air. Oops. It's a really high-quality piece of work.
I think you can.
And you can, Nick, you can bleep me out on that. Or you can use the standout tag as many times as you like during the week on other sites' high-quality content, because it helps signal to Google News what other high-quality work is going on, and we build up this rich ecosystem of standout tag links. And then finally, add your mobile app links to the Publisher Center to drive engagement back to your mobile apps, and also add your YouTube channel so we can ensure that we're servicing all of your great video content. Okay, so that wraps up the Google News portion. Okay, darn, here's where I wanted all the links to be clickable. But as Nick mentioned, we can add these as a comment to on the Google Plus page. But there's a ton of information here.
We'll put these all in the comments below in the description of this particular office hours. And then obviously, if anybody has any questions, you can always reach out to us at Google News Lab on Twitter or at our Google Plus page, which you're probably already on if you're watching this. Stacie, I actually have a couple questions for you from the audience if you're ready.
Perfect. Yeah, let's cover Google News first, and then I'll do my brief overview of AMP, and then we can dive into maybe 1 or 2 AMP questions, because I know there'll be a ton.
Cool.
Okay.
I have one question about Google News. So from, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, Aditya Dar asked, he's curious about archives with Google News. And he says he's wondering if perhaps you could update us on the status of Google News archives. The research community would love it if we could bring back the ability to research within newspapers, even those before 1970. And the archive is an excellent source for academic research, and we would like to thank you for making old papers available in the public domain.
Oh, that really warms my heart. I do love that tool as well. Let's see if I can present. We actually do have the Google News archives up and running. Nick, can you see my screen?
Sure can.
Okay. So I assume this is what he's talking about. And this is, I agree, a fantastic research resource. And we do have tons of papers that are actually printed prior to 1970. You can search through all these. I grew up in Arcadia, California, for example. I think we even have 3 different papers from Arcadia here in our newspaper archive. So it actually is up and running as a live tool. We unfortunately are not accepting any new partners for the archive because for every publisher that you see listed here, we actually had to reach out to each of them individually and scan all their digital archives. So it was a Herculean task. I give mass kudos to the team that worked on this product, but they had to say, you know, we can't accept anymore. This is what we believe is a fairly robust product, and we hope that there's enough information to do the research that you need. And we've got hundreds of titles here, so it really is a treasure trove of content. It's like a time capsule. It's really great to go back in time. But hopefully this helps with your research, and hopefully I can answer other questions. But yeah, this is what we've got, and reach out to me if you're having trouble searching or looking for a specific paper. Maybe I can help you out with that.
Very cool. Thank you, Adidia, for that question. And I have another question came in just a few minutes ago from Charlotte Robinson. She's having trouble with crawl errors on her site. What's the easiest way for her to get help on things like that?
Good question. So let me go back to this. So Charlotte, hopefully you're looking at your Search Console account, and oh, that's the sitemap one. Okay, so hopefully you're looking here at your Search Console account and clicking on the News tab, and then you'll see the list of specific articles that are generating errors. If you believe that the error is incorrect, or it can't possibly be that the article is too long or too short, for example, email us specifically about a particular article, and we'll try to provide more granular advice. But generally, the errors are spot on. I would try to look at the error, look at the format of the article. Remember, it's not necessarily the text itself. It's how the page is laid out. It's the format of the URL itself. And you can generally get an idea like, okay, you know, I do have a lot of stuff going on in the left-hand rail or the right-hand rail, and that's why the Google News bot thinks that this article is too short, for example. But if you're looking to reach out to us specifically, do I have the... So if you just search Google News Publisher Help Center or Google News Publisher Forum, both of those are excellent resources to get help directly from our team. So you can try both. You'll probably get a faster response from the forum, but we'll also try to reach out to you through the Help Center as well. Or you can tweet at me. That'll get directly to me at Stacie Chan.
Very cool. So we only have about 15 minutes left. If anybody has additional questions about Google News, obviously feel free to leave those comments in the comment section below. And we'll get to those probably after the office hours, but you want to go ahead and take it away on AMP?
Perfect. 15 minutes. We are right on time. Okay. So introducing accelerated mobile pages, or AMP. So if any of you have been following news going on around the industry, you'll probably have heard about AMP, which is a new initiative launched by Google, other companies like Twitter and Pinterest, to essentially make the mobile web better. It's no secret and very obvious to all of us that most users these days are consuming content on their mobile devices. But throughout the evolution of content migrating to mobile pages, it's become clunky. There's so much other JavaScript and code on mobile pages that just causes these pages to load incredibly slowly. So you can see the contrast between the two images on the screen. You've got web pages today, which just have so much script. It takes seconds to load, which for mobile users like myself feels like an eternity. The idea behind accelerated mobile pages is to strip down the code that you have on your pages to make these pages load faster. And all of this is outlined in ampproject.org. So I highly encourage you to check that link out. It's got a wealth of information, much more than we can go over in the remaining 15 minutes that we have in this office hours. And pop quiz, Nick, do you know what % of people abandon a website that takes more than 3 seconds to load?
I know I often do.
Yes, myself included. So 2 out of 2. It's not quite 100%, but 40% of users are now just completely bouncing if a page takes too long to load. So not only are you not getting any impressions on the ad, your users aren't reading your great content. So the number one goal of Accelerated Mobile Pages project is to speed up the mobile web. And a few other things, the side benefits of this and how it works essentially is that articles from any publisher around the world and in the coming months, any website around the world, is that these articles are cached so they load instantly. And publishers have control over the design and your business model. So you can keep the color, you can keep the logo of your publication. It's not to make articles look homogeneous. The only thing that's similar across all of these articles is that they load instantly. Same thing with your business models. AMP is going to support whether you decide to have paywalls, a majority of the ad formats that you have on your articles. And ultimately, we believe this will deepen the engagement that your readers have with your content because they naturally can just swipe through 10 articles at a time and really just spiral down a rabbit hole of your content. They're going to be consuming so many more times the number of articles that they're currently reading because the load time is going to be near instant. This is my favorite part. Oh, I do have to explain technically how it works before I dive into the demo, and then we'll get to that. I get very excited about this part. So here's the progression, the brief timeline. So various publishers, you enter your content into your CMS. There is the AMP HTML side of the page. And when the Google Cache discovers an AMP page, it'll get cached on a server. Twitter, Pinterest, other companies can also cache this specific AMP article. And then after it's cached, those articles will be displayed across a myriad of surfaces and devices. It doesn't have to just be on Google properties. Anyone can use AMP pages, actually, because it's basically signaling to any company, website user that this is going to be a faster loading page. And on all those devices, the ad revenue and analytics will still be the same as any other non-AMP page. And to clarify, not every single page has to be AMP. Not every page has to have a corresponding HTML. A page can be an AMP HTML page because ultimately we think this is pretty much how pages should be structured. They should try to be as clean and stripped down as possible to reduce the loading times. And if you want to check out the specific technical specs, you can go to github.com/AMP project. And I forgot to mention, but this is an open source initiative. Google is not hosting the content. It's not owned by Google or Pinterest or Twitter. It's for everyone to use. And on these GitHub pages, you'll see we're still in the process of defining what these specs are because we don't have the right answers. This is an initiative in that we're floating the idea out to the industry. And all the publishers are telling Google, Twitter, Pinterest what they want to see as part of different AMP components and specs. So this is the most exciting part, I believe. So if everyone's on their mobile device. So this is the time to pick up your mobile device in your whatever browser. You can go to Chrome, type in g.co/AMP demo. It should show you Google search page. And you do need to make sure your language is in English. We're testing this out in English first. So if you go to g.co/AMP demo, you can type in any newsy query that's guaranteed to populate a lot of results. I usually type in Obama. That's pretty safe. And then once you do that, you should get kicked out to it should trigger, I'm sorry, a carousel. So the carousel will actually have 10 different articles that you can click on, and the articles should load instantly. You can't even blink fast enough, and you can swipe left and right throughout different articles, and it's just the cleanest experience. It's so much fun to read AMP articles. I can get through so many articles in much less time, not because I'm a fast reader, but because they can actually load instantly. It's such an incredible experience. So this is, again, the AMP demo link. Test it out. This is the best way to understand what AMP is. And you'll understand why it's a better user experience for every single person around the world, basically. It's breathtaking. It's so much fun.
So I have a quick question here, which might actually be a good segue.
Sure.
Christian Oliveira, which I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong, I apologize. He has a quick question about AMP. He says, are there any technical requirements regarding where to host the AMP HTML version of a content piece? So for example, does it need to be hosted on the same domain, the same subdomain, or can it be hosted in a different subdomain or even a totally different domain altogether?
Good question. For now, it does need to be on the same domain. But again, things are evolving. Check out the GitHub page. If you have a request that we allow, AMP pages to be hosted on other domains, you should post it on the GitHub page. And also the idea is that CDNs just consume so much bandwidth, jumping around, having all these redirects. So we're really trying to simplify AMP pages as much as possible. And to signal what is the AMP page, you'd put in the header link rel, quote, AMP HTML, and that should act as the canonical page. So I hope that answers Christian's question.
Cool, thank you, Christian, for that. And then one other question from William Alvarez. He's curious to know about counting clicks and basically just counting traffic on these types of pages. Are there ways to track traffic on AMP pages as well currently?
Yes, great question. So I'll get to that. I want to give a brief overview about all the third-party vendors who are so committed to AMP. They really believe in the entire initiative. We have a lot of analytics partners, including ComScore, Google Analytics, I believe Omniture, don't quote me on that one, but they have committed to building out the exact analytics that you'll see for your AMP pages. So again, this is still your content. So Google doesn't get any clicks every time an AMP page is read or anything like that. But all these analytics companies have committed to showing the exact number of clicks that AMP pages get, as well as non-AMP pages. So it's just another type of page, but it'll be very crystal clear how many clicks you're getting. And that's a good segue into the different partners we have. So we have a lot of analytics companies that have partnered with us, a lot of content apps as well, like Nuzzle, as I mentioned, Twitter and Pinterest have also committed to servicing AMP articles because they ultimately want to show users fast loading content as well. So you could be on Pinterest, you click on a link. If Pinterest will find an AMP article, that's the one that they're going to show the user instead of a non-AMP article. So yes, I know we're talking specifically to news publishers today, but AMP, we hope, extends across the entire web. So that was sort of an indirect response to your question. I hope it does hit the analytics point, though.
Great. Thank you for that question, William.
Okay, and so quickly the roadmap. On October 8th, that's when we launched that preview, g.co/AMP demo, with a few test partners. We're currently in the exploration phase. We want to hear as much feedback from you as possible about what features you want to see. Does this work for your business model? If you tell us, hey, my ad format isn't being supported on AMP, please let us know. We want to hear from as many voices across the industry as possible. And then in Q1, probably mid to late Q1, we're actually going to launch AMP articles within search. So the first iteration will probably be that carousel of 10 AMP articles that are triggered. So it's going to be very prominent on the search results page, because that's what users want. We've heard time and time again, they want quick loading pages. It's what publishers want too. The idea was born out of requests from publishers saying, hey, how do we make mobile pages load faster without relinquishing control to other platforms? We want to still be able to host content ourselves, but help us load this faster. So it was a collaboration amongst publishers, technologists to figure out this initiative, and AMP is the idea. And again, it's not a solution, but it's the beginning of this really exciting conversation that we believe will change the industry for the better. Okay, and as I mentioned, we do want to hear from you. Join the AMP initiative. Check out the GitHub page, check out the Stack Overflow page to figure out how AMP will best support your site. We don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all model. As I mentioned, you don't have to have every single page scripted in AMP HTML. Figure out what works best for your content and your business model. And then once you start exploring that with your developers, let us know. Do you need better analytics support? Do you need certain ad formats supported? Anything that's critical to your business, we want to hear from you. If there are specific paywall requirements or subscription requirements that you require, list that in the GitHub and Stack Overflow pages. And then finally, in Q1, make sure that there's a canonical tag pointing to your AMP files. So it can be serviced in that beautiful search carousel in Q1. And even now, actually, there are various live search experiments going on with existing AMP articles. So your AMP files can be surfaced if you're pointing to them as of today. Okay, and as Nick mentioned, he and I are going to start doing an entire series of AMP Hangouts on Air in the new year, because we know there's probably tons more questions that you all have.
Very cool. Stacie, thank you. That's an amazing amount of information. I do have one last question. We have about 2 minutes left, so 30 seconds for this two-part question. Hussein Mashinali has two questions. The first one I'll start with, he said that there's been a lot of recent algorithmic updates on Google News that have hit a lot of news sites. Is there another algorithmic change in the future? And this is actually a question I get quite a bit. People are always trying to chase these algorithmic changes to make sure that their stuff is being surfaced. And I think this kind of ties back to one of our original comments about high quality content. But can we talk a little bit about algorithmic changes and how it affects Google News?
Sure. There's no time frame for algorithms or set changes to the Google News algorithm at all. It's constantly being examined by the engineers. We want to make sure that the algorithm is always surfacing the best content. So to answer your question, there's no algorithm in place. There's always improvements going on. If the engineers find that they can do better, that's what they're going to do.
Very cool. And we're always trying to improve the algorithms and make sure that the search experience and the user experience is best for users. So that's an ongoing thing. The second question he had was about AMP specifically and what the relationship is between AMP and Google News. And is Google News going to be implementing AMP in some way? Is responsive design going to be a part of that? And how does Google News maybe choose between an AMP page and a normal page?
Great questions. We're launching AMP first in search, but Google News is a product that will be using AMP shortly after. I can't commit to a specific timeline, but yes, it makes total sense to surface AMP articles within Google News. As I mentioned, make sure the AMP article is the canonical. So you have to point to the AMP file. In the header of your original HTML article, make sure you have that link rel AMP HTML tag. And that's how search and all different Google properties, all other companies like Twitter and Pinterest will know where the AMP file lives. And that's the article that we're going to surface. And I think we're out of time. I just hope my conference room is booked for a little longer, but I might get kicked out soon.
I might also too. Just one last comment before we take off. I just wanted to remind everybody that if you go to the g.co/newslab site, we also have tutorials on a lot of this that we're talking about today. If you search within the search feature, for Google News or just news. You'll actually pull up quite a few different tutorials on various different subjects, including getting published on Google News, working with things like the archive, which goes back to the question that we had earlier, the Google News Publishing Center. And we're going to be producing more tutorials as time goes on Google News as well as AMP, so stay tuned on that. If anybody has additional questions that we didn't get a chance to cover today in the session, make sure you leave your comments in the comment section below or on our Twitter page at Google News Lab. You can also reach out to Stacie at Stacie Chan on Twitter. You can reach out to me at Nick Digital on Twitter as well. And stay tuned for next month. We're going to be taking a couple weeks off here for the holidays, but coming back in January with a short sprint on AMP-related Hangouts and open office hours. So stay tuned.
Great. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.